Okay. So in this last training on ministry strategy, and of course, we can always come back and revisit if there's anything specific you're looking at or you would like to look at more. Um, the last thing that we need to do is we need to measure. And in the first week, we said that in order to get results, biblical, godly fruit in our ministry, we have to take massive action. We have to fail. We have to fail as fast as we can because we just got to get through those hurdles and barriers. And we're failing in the direction of solving the problems and meeting the needs of our audience and of our our flock, the group of people that God has called us to. And that requires knowing who they are specifically. We're not trying to reach everyone. We're trying to reach, particular groups of people in our community that we can influence in a powerful way through the meeting of their needs. Now, you can have all of that and just completely miss it. The intention can be there and we can just 180 degree in the wrong direction because we're not looking for feedback. And feedback is, I guess if we put it in sort of a music ministry, you get the speakers feeding back into the microphones and then you get this feedback loop, and that's a bad feedback. Similar concept with marketing and strategy with feedback is when we implement something in our ministry, what happens? And the idea of feedback comes from what's called systems theory, which is just a field of study. Usually, something like systems engineers will study that. But when I implement a change into a complicated system like a church, like a ministry, what are the effects of that? And a lot of people have heard about, the butterfly effect. That comes from another study called chaos theory. But, the flapping of a butterfly's wings over here creates a hurricane over there. Well, small changes in a ministry, as I'm sure you know, can create big consequences. And so it's not obvious with complex systems like ministries what a change is going to do, even despite our best kind of critical thinking. You might try to solve a problem, but make a bigger problem. And so measuring feedback is how we can assess the effectiveness of our changes. And if we implement a change and then we get really bad feedback, we can roll that change back and say, okay, hold on, we're going to reassess because that's not functional. And we're going to try this instead. And then maybe we get better results. And so, what in marketing this is called is it's called the key performance indicators. And so, and I'll give an example of this. One of the goals that I have for ClickMill is to we do marketing services for clients. We have any number of clients, and that's great. But one of the things that I've come to realize looking at our numbers and our data and our performance indicators is that we don't get a lot of kind of I would call them like high end large budget clients through the website. Those, if you have, $1,000, $5,000 a month to be spending on marketing services, you're looking for a referral. You're looking for someone who's like, I know a guy. And that seems to be where most of our large clients come from. And so as our website has increased, we're getting 1,000 hits a day right now, the number of signups for those high-end services, schedule a strategy call, is essentially 0%. And it's not that they don't come in, but there could be something more effective. And that is why I started looking into kind of this direction of things and looking to fill this out and continuing to look at that. Um, and so one of the things that I look at as a key performance indicator is what we call, and I'm going to share my screen here. It's called the conversion rate. Okay. And so I'm going to come back over to this image to show you. And a lot of ministries ask questions about numbers that are the wrong question. When I work with, for example, I was on a call this week with one of our ministry school clients, and they're asking, well, how many leads do we get? And that's the wrong question. I could send you 1 million leads a day. And if nobody purchased anything, nobody sent their kids to your school, then it doesn't matter how many leads you get. So we want to make sure when we're looking at key performance indicators, we're looking at the right number. Okay. And this is kind of what we're going to look at as we begin today. So can you see my screen here, understanding analytic data?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So what they're asking with this, let's say this Christian school, is they're saying, okay, we're getting impressions out there on Google. People are coming into the website. They've got about 4,000 hits a month in the website, and that's fine. And usually they want to see that's growing. But here, the conversion, which is the download your brochure, call today, schedule a tour. And the question is, you're not reporting this on our dashboard. How many are we getting? And so this is not the right question, because that the number of leads coming in has absolutely nothing to do with the result they want. It is not correlated, or I guess maybe it's loosely correlated with the number of students coming in.
Right.
I can send you 1,000 brochure downloads a month and it's not going to have any impact. We've also seen this prior to starting ClickMail. I was with a digital marketing firm, I believe I've told you, and we ran, just I don't even know. So much money in advertising for these Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley winery wedding venues. And yeah, and they told us we started getting like 200 or 300 leads a month for these guys. And we go into our call and we're so excited. We're like, man, they're going to love us. And they're like, we hate this. This is the worst advertising and marketing we've ever paid for. And we're like, what? And they said, you're sending us all these leads every month, but none of them can pay for the service. This is worth it. We can't filter through 300 people a month and find the one or two that can pay $10,000 a day to be here. You got to get rid of these leads. So just hard numbers don't mean anything. What usually is a good measure is the rate, the conversion rate, or the sales rate. And so, for example, on the ClickMill website, what I'm looking for when we're testing, and we've tested a whole bunch of these different conversions. So I'll just go over here. And what am I settling on? Well, down here is what we're testing right now as the lead magnet. Get your 5-day ministry growth Bible study. And when I tried ebooks, we got like a 0.5% download rate. When I tested a free course, we got exactly 0 for months and months. When I tested get a free consulting call for an hour, we got 0. Nobody wants that. And so we went through, and so when we implemented this is about 1.5 to 2% conversion rate. So conversion being passive viewer of the page to an active participant. They said, here's my information. I want to move forward in this part of the kind of surface level relationship, but I want to start a relationship. And so 1.5 to 2% is the best conversion rate that we've had yet. And the rate is important because, if I have 10 signups on an ebook and I have 10 signups on the, let's say a course, which one's better? Well, I have no idea. Maybe one month I had, 30,000 website views, and one month I had 30 views. And if I look at a 16-month time frame on the website, that is the case. Those numbers mean nothing. So
I think the screen is on something else.
Oh no. Oh, thank you. Please interrupt me next time.
Yeah, no worries.
Share. Let me see. Screen 2. Okay. Are you seeing
Yes.
better?
Yeah.
Okay. So this one's getting a 1.5 to 2% conversion rate. And that's pretty good, especially because a lot of these ministry leaders don't really know what they're looking for. So to get them interacting is, we've been testing these different things for like 6 months. Now, moving further from that, so we've been testing different things to engage ministry leaders. And this is a Bible study format of the 5 things Jesus did to influence and grow his following.
Yeah.
And there's about 3 hours of video. So you're familiar with the content. Now, in there, we do 5 days, and then the call to actions in that 5-day journey is book a call or subscribe today for this right here. And so now we are testing, okay, we know how to get people into something. Are they going to actually use it consistently for 5 days? And when they do, is it enough value for them to decide they want to join a weekly training course or a weekly workshop? And so that is what we're testing. Now, the key performance indicator that I'm looking for on the tests on our lead magnet, it is a piece of something valuable that is a magnet to leads. So that's called a lead magnet on a website. So the key performance indicator, the KPI that we're using here, is conversion rate. Okay. So that's how I track, and that's how I track across multiple trials what's working and what's, better and worse. So in regard to ministry, we want to have key performance indicators for all of the things that we're trying to implement and test in our ministry that are in alignment with our strategic plan. So broadening this out to our previous conversations, we say, okay, decision-making principle number 1 is, where does God have our ministry moving? What's the vision? And everybody starts looking at the vision, and then we have unity in the church. It helps to start breaking down silos, these different types of things. And that vision needs to be difficult enough that people realize, oh, I've really got to commit. I've really got to get in on this, because, Pastor Karen is not going to be able to do this by herself. So I need to help too. So now we've got people starting to get passionate. Maybe we got some people that filter themselves out on the front end, because now they're like, oh, well, I guess I'm called to another ministry that focuses on homelessness. Okay, and then we go through our ministries and we say, number 1, is this in alignment with the vision? And if it's not, and it can't be brought into alignment, like we've discussed in, I believe, last week's call, then we're going to start pruning. And we talked about the scripture that says, Christ prunes the vine, and anything does not produce fruit, then, he takes it off and he puts it in the fire. So we're pruning our ministry to be in alignment. And all of the things that we're keeping, we want them to not just be a good thing to keep, we want them to be the right good thing. And what that means is we can have something that's in alignment with our vision, that's passed all these tests, but it doesn't produce fruit. And that's when we get bloat. So we can have bloat. We can have 100 ministries in line with this vision, but we don't want, why would I do 100 things to get to the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey, if there's actually a path that's just 4 things? When we look at Moses taking the Israelites, it was leave Israel, cross the Red Sea, get through the desert, fight the giants, the armies, whoever it is in there, and then inhabit the promised land. That's a 5-step process. They didn't take a 100-step process. They did 5. And so we don't want bloat. We don't want unnecessary stuff and complexity getting to the vision. We want to start testing and seeing, what is it that people in our ministry are actually doing? What's actually meaningful and important for them, and what moves them toward that vision where they're living this certain kind of life that God is calling them to. And so the way we do that is we say, okay, what are the most important numbers that this ministry can be measured by? And so maybe, for example, what we might say is, let's go back to our example with single inner city working moms. Can we just get them in the front door? Okay, let's test some different outreach strategies that meet their needs, and let's see if they show up. And that's exactly what we're doing with this banner on the website. So do they show up? Well, if you throw a worship night and you don't get any single inner city moms, and let's say you actually went to them and you put this in front of them and nobody showed up, it's because they don't want that. That's a pickle pop. We talked about pickle pops, right? Okay. It's a pickle pop. They don't want that. But if you have a night off where you provide childcare and you just have a bunch of other moms, and you bring in a massage therapist, I don't know, I'm just making something up here, and they come to that, and during that, you shift that conversation toward a Christian thing. You say, listen, we want you to have a healthy whole family because Christ wants a healthy whole relationship with you. And that's why we do this. And what we want you to do next is we want you to come to our job skills training, because we want you to be able to demand a higher wage for your time. So you get more time with your kids, you get more time with your family, something like that. And so what do? We track the number of ladies who go from the free fun night to the job skills training night or the resume writing night or whatever it is. And we track that, but at the same time, we're tracking the rate at which, they move from the free fun night to the training night. And we're looking at that and we're saying, okay, so 10% of them went from this class to that class. Okay. Let's go talk to them and let's say, what would have made this more appealing? What would have made you more excited? What was it that was holding you back from coming? And again, this is just what Rick Warren did when he starts Saddleback. He just went and said, why didn't you like this? And depending on their answers, you continue to refine that second step up. So assuming you can get them there in efficient numbers, we have to be able to convert them to the next step in that journey, in their churchgoer journey, in an efficient manner. And so that takes kind of multiple iterations until you can find what that feedback indicates is effective for them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Awesome. So what needs to happen for every area of ministry, whether it's finance, we need to look at, like, for example, lifetime value. And I know this doesn't sound very Christian, but it's the financial side of a church. The lifetime value of someone coming into the church is a really important number. So we can just say, well, what's the tithe? But the lifetime value is a better number because it's going to tell you a lot more about who's coming in, how long they're coming in, and how long they're tithing. And so what that is, that's how long does the average person stay, which is a great number to know, to track, when they come to our ministry. Is it 2 weeks or 2 years? And then what is the average tithe per household on a given Sunday? So you would just say, how many families or individuals, but it's kind of hard to do that with kids. So I like families. So it's okay, we've got, say, 50 families or 100 families or 200 families coming on a Sunday. And then our average tithe is this much. Okay, well, we just take the average tithe and we'll divide it by the number of families. So now we know average tithe per family per Sunday. And we also know how long the average family comes when they stay. And then we can multiply those and get a projection of average lifetime value. So, does this make sense? So
Yep.
okay. And so you can say, when we get a new family from a financial perspective, they're going to tithe $200 over the lifetime or $500 over the lifetime of their stay with our ministry, or 10,000 or whatever it is. And then you can start looking at key performance indicators for something like an advertising strategy. Okay, so if they're going to tithe maybe a 500 estimate when they're coming into our ministry for the next year or 2 years, then we know we cannot spend more than $500 to get each person into the door. Now you have an upper limit to the investments that you can put into the ministry without being unsustainable. Okay, so there are three phases to growth, and this is what I study. This is what I've been studying for a long time: is how do we grow ministries? And one of the big mistakes that we make in ministry is we go straight for the growth. We're going to the moon. We're going to see the miracles. And it's okay, maybe. And at the same time, a very useful way of thinking. And this is a mental model or a limited sort of way of thinking about reality that a lot of, what do you want to say? I would say worldly people who get a lot of growth, they use this to to make sure things are stable prior to growth. And so what they would say is they would say, invert the question first. If you want lots and lots of growth in your ministry in any area, why don't we first say, not how do we get the growth? Because that's the hard thing all the ministries are trying to get. How do we not lose the growth we have?
Mm.
And the way you lose the growth you have, and that's easy. Anybody can answer that question. But if all these ministries are declining, all you have to do to beat out the 80% is to not decline. And that's easy. Okay, well, let's make sure we do this, this, and this. And one would be, don't spend more than the average person brings in. That is one, and that's called sustainable. And so what people who grow things for a living is, we have to sustain what we have long enough to find the growth, in our case, that God has for us. If we're changing things so rapidly that we cannot sustain what we have, then we will lose everything before we find the growth. And you see this maybe like with day traders. I want to hit it big. And so what do? They take all their savings and they go and they start trading on the stock markets, and they put tens. I have an uncle who actually did this, and they lose everything before they can get any growth because they didn't do it in a sustainable way over time.
Right.
So one of the things that we want to do is we want to say, okay, if we want to grow, how do we first not shrink? And let's make sure we're hitting all of those. And you put key performance indicators on those. Okay. Okay. Let's say Sunday attendance. What do we need to do to just make sure we're not shrinking? And once you get, how do we just try to make sure that the income doesn't keep going down, or, whatever it is. And we make sure we're hitting the not shrinking numbers, and then we set growth numbers to track. And we begin testing when we make a change to the not shrinking and we try to grow, what are the impacts there? And we start measuring increases, if any, toward those growth goals. And usually the way that I find it works best is trying to meet a new need with that ministry, or changing that ministry to meet a need, and seeing if that is something that the ministry participants respond to. And, and it's such a simple way to do it. And I think a lot of times we get really caught up on, well, how do we grow, or how do we increase our finances, or how do we get more volunteers? And all of those are very unintentionally, it's like, well, we need these things to do our ministry and help people, but they're all very self-centered and they're all very self-focused. And the reason why ministries have a hard time growing when they shift inward is because the reason they started growing to begin with was because they were focused outward. They were focused on the needs of the people in their community, and you had that passionate visionary who's like, we're going to solve homelessness in our community. And they started going out and meeting needs, and they happened to hit the right need, and people started showing up. And so when we're hitting this place where we start to see a little bit of stagnation or a little bit of decline at the top of that bubble, we looked at a bubble chart last week. Okay. When we start getting up to the top of there, usually that's where we start getting a little insecure, and we're looking around and we're like, well, okay, hold on. How do we get more? And the way that you do that is by getting back to the fundamentals. And we say, why did we have the growth to begin with? What was the need that was being met that people were responding to? And how do we do that again? And I'm actually reading an excellent book right now on this. I would really recommend it if you're interested. This book right here is called How the Mighty Fall. This is written by a businessman. It is a secular book, so just be aware of that. Some ministry leaders clutch their pearls when I say that. This is excellent. It's a study of a bunch of companies and what they did that made them collapse. And so I'm speaking from this right now a little bit. The companies that get confused and say, well, it's a process. There are certain things we do that make us successful. Things we do need to change over time because people's needs change over time. But why we did it in the beginning, the what the needs were and the why we were meeting them, that's the core of the ministry. And we lose that over time, especially as we start looking inward and we start saying, well, how do we meet our own needs? And so we have to go back and we have to say, what was the reason people were coming to begin with? What was the need we were meeting? Why were we meeting it? What were we passionate about? What were people passionate about with us? And then figuring out whether maybe the old things you were doing worked and you got away from those, or maybe you're still doing the old things, but they need to be shifted into a new format for, a new time, something to that effect. So it's not the what you're doing, but it's the need that you were meeting and the why you were doing it that's important. And when you reassess that and you can go back and find a new way or the old way of meeting that need, then people will see that passion get reinvigorated. And so I think when you look at fruit, and I think you kind of mentioned that COVID. Have we talked about COVID and what is it? What do they call ministries? Non-essential. Have we talked about that at all?
Talked a little bit about it in one of the sessions, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So with COVID, a lot of ministry leaders talk about that because there are a lot of shifts in the church after COVID. And I don't think COVID is really relevant. I think COVID was kind of a wake-up point. And I hear a lot of ministry leaders and they talk about, well, make sure I'm not sharing my screen anymore. Okay, cool. They say, well, at least in the United States, we have the freedom of speech. We have the freedom of assembly. This is illegal. We are essential because we meet spiritual needs, the most important needs. And I agree with all that stuff. I agree that the gospel is the most important need. I agree that at least in the US, we have freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and, whatever all the things are. And when you just look, my question isn't whether or not those are valid. I think those are valid. The problem is they didn't work. They can, all these ministry leaders, we can all talk until we're blue in the face about our rights and about how essential the spiritual truth of Jesus is and all this stuff, except nobody was allowed to go to church. So what did we miss? Because what we are espousing doesn't produce fruit in reality. And that's what I'm interested in, is how do we get real fruit, not whatever it is we got. And so we were deemed non-essential, at least in the US. And so my question was, what does the definition essential mean? And essential means you are absolutely necessary. I looked it up. That's the definition. You're like water. Water is essential. The government did not deem the water plants essential, non-essential, excuse me. They didn't deem the food factories non-essential, like the Tyson chicken packers. They're still going to work because what? We're not going to have food, but it's essential. Well, the church was deemed non-essential. And so laws aside and rights aside and all this other stuff, if it can be shut down and the community doesn't say, we don't accept it, they're open. Like if they shut the water plants down, the community would be like, no, you're crazy. Those are staying open because what is this? This is crazy. That did not happen with the church. And so by definition, the churches that were shut down and did not have ministry over that time are by definition non-essential. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem. Now, I worked with a bunch of ministries that did not get shut down. Their Sunday services got shut down because the government is secular. They don't care about Jesus. They don't care about the spiritual truths. But we had clients that had alcohol rehabilitation centers, clothing stores that helped women get out of the adult entertainment industry, all kinds of ministries that dealt with rehabilitation and homelessness, and nobody shut them down. Why? Because they're essential. We're going to shut down our drug rehabilitation center and all these people are going to go out and live on the street and be homeless and crime's going to go up, and don't worry about it. We're not essential. No, please keep your doors open. You don't need to shut down. It's not a question. And so when we talk about growth in COVID, what happened was a whole bunch of people were given permission not to go to church, and they started sleeping in, and they said, this is kind of nice. Sleeping in meets my needs better than going to church. And that's all it is. It's a risk reward. And they were given permission from the governments to not go to church. They didn't go to church. And they're like, I kind of like this. This is fine. I'll just keep doing this. And that's why you see that slump. Well, all we have to do to function in reality is to make, if we have our little fulcrum here, our teeter-totter, and they decided sleeping in was more valuable and that's got more weight in their life, it meets a better need, all we have to do is find something more essential than waking up 2 hours earlier on a Sunday that meets their needs, and they'll just come back. And the question is, what is it? And that is what we're talking about. And so even with the decline in the finances that you mentioned, I do think that's normal after COVID. And I think that that is a call for churches and ministries to focus back in on the things that their community find essential. And that's what we see with Jesus in the New Testament. He goes to the blind guy. What do you want? Blindness. And he gave him sight. And in the church, a lot of times, it's sort of like, it would be like this. We're meeting needs, but it's kind of like pickle pop needs. It's Jesus goes up to the blind guy and he's like, my son, what do you being ridiculous. I don't like being Jesus. But it's like, what do you need? And he's like, well, I'm blind. I want my sight. And he goes, okay. And he's like, in the name of God and of me, be healed. And, the blind guy opens his eyes and he's like, how do you feel? And he's like, well, I'm still blind. And Jesus is like, well, how about that back pain? Didn't you have some of that? And he's like, oh yeah, I guess my back, I guess that is better. And does he walk away disappointed, or does he walk away excited because he just got a miracle? He walks away disappointed because the most essential need got missed. And Jesus never did that. Blind people, he healed blindness. He gave fish to fishermen. The lame walked. He didn't ever miss the right need. He always got the right need. And so I think when your ministry is able to focus in on the right need surrounding your ministry and in your ministry more, you'll see those numbers go back up. Okay. So, and that's what we see on our website too. When I work with ministry growth Bible studies, we get hundreds and hundreds of signups for those. And then the question is, okay, once they sign up, how do I meet the next need? Because they'll just keep going as long as I'm meeting the need. And so that's what we're testing the key performance indicators for is the thing I'm trying meeting the need? And the number says yes. So we're just going to keep doing that. And then we're going to see how to transition them into the next phase of that strategy we've put together. And we're just going to look at the next numbers. Now, one of the things, and this is why we're talking about this, that a lot of ministries miss is they're doing a lot of things, but they don't track it. So they have no way to measure what's working and what's not working. And so they just end up with a lot of bloat, and that drains their resources because now they're maintaining all of these ministries and services that don't even function to grow the church. Okay. Mm-hmm. Any questions on key performance indicators or making sure we're tracking at least one number, if not maybe 2 or 3 for each different ministry?
That makes sense.
Okay. Awesome. So what we'll do now is I'm going to pause the recording and restart it. And then we're going to move into a different, a little bit more of a theoretical area of ministry that I think can help with growth. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.